What's going on, everybody? Kalupis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you 5 of my favorite smartphones you can buy in 2022 for less than $300. For what they are, these phones all have a good amount of features and some real good performance, all while being reasonably affordable. Now, for your convenience, I will be linking to all of these phones in the video description, so be sure to check out these links for the latest up-to-date pricing, because this is always changing. And of course, if you want to learn more about any of these phones individually, be sure to check out my full reviews of them on the channel. But with that being said, let's get started. So up first, we got the Motorola Moto G Power 2021. Now, as the name suggests, this phone was actually released in 2021, so it's about a year old, being the predecessor to the Motorola Moto G Power 2022 that came out a little bit more recently. But in my opinion, not only is this phone still good by today's standards, but I honestly think it's actually quite a bit better than the Moto G Power 2022. Now with this phone, we're getting a 6.6-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 266, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen to body ratio of around 83.8%. So despite not having a really high resolution or anything like that, this phone is a really good size. At 6.6 inches, you're going to be getting the benefits of having a larger display, but it's not so large that it's uncomfortable to hold. So in general, if you're doing lots of content consumption and still want something decently compact, then this phone is going to be a great choice. And although it's only 720p, I do still think the image is decently sharp and the colors look really good as well. Now for storage with this phone, we're getting 32GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, but keep in mind there's another variant of this phone that has 64. Now if you have a choice, I would definitely go for the 64GB model because 64GB is quite a bit better than 32. That being said, seeing that this phone has 32GB is really the one downside to this phone. For most people, 32GB is probably not going to be enough, but luckily we do get microSD card expansion, so as long as you watch what you're putting on your phone, you probably shouldn't have too much trouble unless you're a power user. Now for security features, we got a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key, definitely a nice spot for it. And there's face unlock as well, so we're getting 2 options to get into it. As you can see here, the fingerprint scanner is real fast and responsive, no issues whatsoever, so you should have no trouble getting into it. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, we got a nice looking hole punch design for the front facing camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. Now unfortunately there's no ultra wide camera here, another downside of this phone, but on the bright side, the photo quality itself is actually pretty good. So if you're taking a lot of photos for social media or something like that, and you don't really need a ton of different features, then camera wise, this phone should still be just fine. And remember, there is a macro camera, so if you want to get those close-up detailed images, that should be no problem with this phone. For video recording, this phone maxes out at 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so nothing really special here. But again, in general, if you're just taking more basic photos and videos, then this phone will get the job done just fine. Now internally with the Moto G Power 2021, with this phone, we're getting 3GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 662 processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 306 and a multi-core score of 1370. Now on one hand, this is definitely not the fastest phone in the world, but for what it is, I do think it's actually pretty good. You're probably not going to want to do any heavy gaming like Fortnite or anything like that on it, but at the same time, if you're doing more basic activities like browsing the web, going on social media, and even streaming content like videos and music, the Moto G Power 2021 will be perfectly fine for that. Now for the battery, the Moto G Power 2021 has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 15 watt fast charging. So this is definitely a real good battery here. At 5000 mAh, it's pretty much the largest battery you can get in a smartphone, at least on the US market. So you're gonna get a ton of battery life, both throughout the day and down the road in terms of longevity. And in addition to this, the 15 watt fast charging definitely helps. So if you need to charge up your phone a little faster, if you have a decently powerful fast charger, maybe a car charger, something like that, then having this 15 watt fast charging will definitely make a difference. Now unfortunately, this phone doesn't have NFC, so if you want to make contactless mobile payments, unfortunately you won't be able to with this phone. And in addition to this, as far as software goes, this phone does have Android 11, so if you're really concerned with getting the newest version of Android as it comes out, seeing that this phone is already over a year old, it might not be the best choice for you. But if you're not too concerned about the software, then you're probably going to be fine with it, because this phone, while not having the newest version of Android, does run really well with Android 11. Now up next, we got the Blue F91 5G. Now keep in mind, out of all these phones, this is one of the only two in this video that actually has 5G connectivity. So if you do want a 5G phone, then this is definitely going to be a good option. Now with this phone, we're getting a 6.8-inch LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 396, and an aspect ratio of 20.5:9. So despite just being a plain old LCD display, we got some real good features here. First of all, at 6.8 inches, this is definitely one of the larger phones in this video, giving you the benefits of having a large display, but at the same time it's not too bulky, so it's still going to be decently comfortable to hold. In addition to just being large, this phone also has a real good form factor. With an aspect ratio of 20.5:9, it's going to be taller and more narrow, and this is going to give you a more immersive experience when you're doing things in landscape mode. And if you're reading, you'll be able to fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. The 1080p resolution is another great thing about this phone. It's going to give us a nice, sharp, crisp image, so if you're consuming a lot of content, whether you're streaming videos, playing games, looking at photos, whatever the case may be, you're going to get a real good experience with this phone. Now for storage, the Blue F91 5G is getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so a real good amount of storage. No matter what you do with your phone, whether you're a power user and you have a bunch of apps and photos and videos and stuff like that, or you're just more of an average user and you don't have a whole lot on your phone, either way, you're not going to go wrong with 128GB. Remember, there's also microSD card expansion, so if you need even more space to offload stuff like photos and videos, that's not going to be a problem either. Now this phone does support 10-watt wireless charging, so if that's a feature that's important to you, definitely keep this in mind. And it is worth mentioning, this is the only phone out of all of these that does have wireless charging, so again, keep this in mind if you really want that feature. For security features, we do have a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. Again, definitely a great spot for a fingerprint scanner, and there is face unlock as well, so we're getting those two options to get into it. Let's go ahead and give the fingerprint scanner a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues here. Now for the camera setup, we got a nice looking hole punch design for the front facing camera, and this camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. So feature wise, this phone has pretty much everything, so if you're taking lots of photos and you want a wider variety of features, then the Blue F91 5G is going to be a great option. In addition to this, for video, this phone can record in 2K in the rear camera and 1080p in the front, and as far as the actual photo and video quality goes, everything does look really good on this phone. Now it's not quite professional grade photography level, but if you're taking more casual photos for social media, maybe vacation photos, something like that, and again, you want a wider variety of features, maybe you want to get close-up detailed images with a macro camera, but you also want to get scenery pictures, group pictures, and just pictures with wider angles in general, then this phone will be a great option for all of that. Now internally with the Blue F91 5G, we're getting 8GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 810 processor. Now I was definitely impressed to see a phone in this price range with 8GB of RAM because that actually is quite a bit. On Geekbench 5, this phone is getting a single core score of 576 and a multi-core score of 1692. And remember, there is 5G connectivity as well, so this phone is not only really fast, but with it you also get access to the 5G network and of course the latest and greatest technology. And as far as what you can do on this phone, I haven't had any performance issues whatsoever, from the more simple things like social media and web browsing to streaming content like videos and music, and even a little bit of mobile gaming. The Blue F91 5G can do it all, no problem. Now of course, if you're doing higher end activities like playing a more demanding game like Fortnite or maybe editing videos, then this phone is probably not going to be the best choice, and it's nowhere near the performance level of a $1,000 flagship phone. But for what it is, if you're doing more normal activities with it, it'll be plenty fast enough to handle all of it. For the battery, this phone has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 18-watt fast charging, and again, it does support 10-watt wireless charging as well. Another nice feature this phone has is NFC, so if you want to make mobile contactless payments, you can with this phone. In general, despite definitely being more on the affordable side and being from a lesser known brand, I do think the Blue F91 5G is not only Blue's best phone yet, but it also does provide a lot of value for the money. And up next is our other 5G phone, the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G. With this phone, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz PLS TFT display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 81.1% screen to body ratio. Now this is a pretty good display. Unfortunately, we're only getting 720p on it, so the resolution isn't high as something like the blue F91 5G for example, but at the same time I still do think it's decently sharp for what it is, and the colors look really nice too. And not only that, but it is a good size at 6.5 inches, maybe not the biggest display out there, but it's still large enough to give you a good experience when you're consuming content. In addition to this is the first phone in the video that actually has a pretty high refresh rate. At 90Hz, the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother, so when you're doing stuff like streaming videos, playing games, all that kind of stuff with motion on the screen, you're going to get a better experience, and when you're just navigating through the phone in general, it's going to feel a little bit more premium as well. Now for storage, the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G is getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so while it's not quite the best, for an affordable 5G phone like this, it's not half bad either. Now of course, if you're a power user and you have a bunch of apps and photos and videos and stuff like that, then you might want to go for a phone like the blue F91 5G that has 128GB of internal storage, but for most people, 64GB, again, while still not being the most spacious phone out there, is still going to be plenty for normal activities. In addition to this, remember there is microSD card expansion here, so if you want to offload photos and videos for example, you can do that no problem. Now for the camera setup here, we got a 5-megapixel front-facing camera. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50-megapixel main camera, a 2-megapixel macro camera, and a 2-megapixel depth sensing camera. So unfortunately, there's no ultra-wide camera, but it has pretty much every other feature. So if you want to get close-up detailed images with the macro camera, for example, or maybe use portrait mode, or even just take regular pictures, then this phone should be perfectly fine. Compared to the other two, I do think the A13 5G does have slightly better photo quality, mainly because the colors, details, and brightness look a little bit better. So if you are taking a lot of regular photos, but you don't necessarily need a bunch of different features, then definitely keep this in mind. For video recording, nothing really special. This phone maxes out at 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so if you're really recording a lot of videos and you want 4K or something like that, then you might want to look at a different device. But otherwise, for more casual use, I do think the videos this phone records are at least decent. Now internally with this phone, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 5G processor. So again, this phone and the blue F91 5G are the only two phones in this video that do have 5G connectivity. But that being said, if you want some other 5G options, I do have other videos about the best 5G phones you can buy in 2022 on the channel, so definitely check those out as well. But that being said, on Geekbench 5, we got a single core score of 467 and a multi-core score of 1111. So this is definitely not the most powerful phone even out of all of these, but if you're just using it for more basic activities like web browsing, social media, stuff like that, and maybe even some light mobile gaming, then it should still be perfectly fine. But I will admit, for a 5G phone, this phone is a little on the weak side in processing power. Now despite the processing power on this phone being a little less impressive, the battery specs more than make up for it with a 5000 mAh battery that supports 15-watt fast charging. So again, we're getting the largest battery you can get in a smartphone, at least in the US, and some pretty decent fast charging as well. So you're going to get a ton of battery life throughout the day and down the road as the battery degrades, which all batteries do. With a large battery like this, you're not going to notice it nearly as quickly as you would with a smaller battery. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a long period of time, then having a phone like this with a 5000 mAh battery is definitely going to be a great choice. And of course, if you ever need to charge up your phone a little bit faster and you have a good fast charger, the 15-watt fast charging will make a difference. As far as NFC goes, this phone does have that feature, so if you want to make mobile contactless payments, with the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, you absolutely can. Next up, we got the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2022. Now keep in mind, this is not to be confused with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022, because while that is a great phone, that phone is not under $300. But that being said, although this Moto G Stylus is not a 5G phone, it still is a great device, especially for the money. Now, of course, as the name suggests, one really unique thing about this phone compared to the others is it does have a stylus, real easy and convenient to get out. And while you're not going to be doing any serious art with this, you can definitely take some handwritten notes. And compared to its predecessors, this stylus is actually decently sensitive, so for what it is, it's really not half bad. Now with this phone, we're getting a 6.8-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 396, an aspect ratio of 20.5:9, and a screen to body ratio of about 84.6%. So this is an absolutely great display. Just like the blue F91 5G at 6.8 inches, it's pretty much the largest display you can get in a smartphone, or at least real close to it. So if you're doing any kind of content consumption at all, you're going to get a great experience on this. In addition to this, it also does have a 1080p resolution, so we got a sharp, crisp image here. And if that wasn't enough, it also has a 20.5:9 aspect ratio, so we're getting a taller and more narrow form factor. And on top of all that, the higher refresh rate really makes the phone look and feel a little bit more premium when you're using it. So if you want a phone with a large display that's also great quality, the Moto G Stylus 2022 is a great choice for that. Now for the storage, this phone is getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so a great amount of storage. Again, most people are probably not going to need more than that. For security features, we got a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. This fingerprint scanner, like pretty much all the others, is real fast and responsive, no problems getting into it. And again, there is face unlock, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now for the camera setup, we got a hole punch for the front facing camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera that also doubles as a macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So feature wise, this phone does have pretty much every feature, and the photo quality is also really good. So if you're taking lots of photos and you want a wider variety of features, this phone is going to be a really good option. For video recording, this phone maxes out at 1080p in both the rear and front cameras. So nothing exceptional here. Internally with this phone, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G88 processor. From our Geekbench 5 benchmark test, we got a single core score of 368 and a multi-core score of 1304. So while it's not the fastest phone of all these, it's really not bad either. So if you're doing more normal activities like browsing the web, going on social media, streaming stuff like videos and music, and a little bit of mobile gaming, then this phone should handle all that stuff just fine. But if you're doing more complicated stuff like video editing, or maybe more demanding games like Fortnite, then you might want to choose another device that has a little bit more processing power. Now the Moto G Stylus 2022 has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 10-watt fast charging, so pretty much the same battery as all these other phones, except the fast charging isn't quite as good, but I will say from experience, the phone still does charge up decently fast, so in most cases, you're probably still gonna have nothing to worry about. Now, unfortunately, this phone doesn't have NFC, so if you do like to make mobile contactless payments, this is probably not going to be the phone for you. But in general, if you're using your phone for more basic activities and you want a large display for content consumption and maybe a stylus too, then the Moto G Stylus 2022 is going to be a great choice for you. And last but definitely not least, we got the Samsung Galaxy A23. Now I don't actually think this phone is even out on the US market, so if you do want it, you're gonna have to get it through eBay or something like that. But again, I will be linking to it in the video description, so if you want to learn more about the pricing and availability, definitely check out that link, because especially since this phone is not on US carriers to my knowledge, this information is probably going to be changing even more frequently than the rest. But that being said, this is honestly a really great device. With this phone, we're getting a 6.6-inch 90Hz PLS TFT display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 400, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 83% screen to body ratio. So this display is good all around. Sure, it's not the largest, but it definitely has some real good qualities. First of all, at 6.6 inches, you're gonna get the benefits of having a larger display, but at the same time, it's not gonna be too large, so it's still comfortable to hold and carry in your pocket and all that. And it has a pretty slim design, so it's not gonna be too bulky either. In addition to this, we do get a 1080p resolution, so the image is nice and crisp, and the 90Hz refresh rate, of course, is going to help as well. So if you're consuming a lot of content, and maybe you don't want a display that's too large, then the Samsung Galaxy A23 is the perfect medium. Now for storage with this phone, we're getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so like a lot of these other phones, we got a great amount of storage here, and of course, microSD card expansion as well never hurts. For the camera setup, we got a water drop notch for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So when it comes to the camera, the Samsung Galaxy A23 does have pretty much all the features, and in addition to this, I would say out of all these phones, the photo and video quality from this phone is absolutely the best. So if taking photos and recording videos is your top priority, then out of all of these, the Samsung Galaxy A23 is probably going to be your best option. If I had to rank them as far as photo and video quality goes, I would say it goes this phone, the Moto G Stylus 2022, Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, Blue F91 5G, and finally the Moto G Power 2021. Now, of course, none of these phones takes bad photos and videos. If they did, they wouldn't be in this video at all. But really, if you want to take the best photos and videos you can out of all of these ones, again, the Samsung Galaxy A23 is just going to be the best option here. Now, internally with this phone, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 680 4G processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 386 and a multi-core score of 1644. Now, considering that this phone is not a 5G phone, this is really impressive. In this day and age, there are very few 4G phones that are actually this fast. This processor is really good, and from my experience, I've had no performance issues whatsoever. So no matter what you're doing with your phone, whether you're browsing the web, going on social media, playing games, streaming content, whatever the case may be, the Samsung Galaxy A23 is definitely going to get the job done. Of course, it's nowhere near as fast as a $1,000 flagship phone, but for an entry-level or mid-range phone, the performance is really impressive all the same. For the battery, like every other phone in this video, this phone does have a 5000 mAh battery, so you probably get it by now. Best battery size you can get in the US. And this phone also supports 25-watt fast charging, making it the best fast charging out of all of these other phones. Now, of course, if you leave your phone plugged in all day anyway, you're not even going to notice the difference. But if you have a more mobile lifestyle where you're not always around a charger, provided you do have a strong enough fast charger, you are going to notice a huge difference because, of course, 25-watt fast charging is real good. The Samsung Galaxy A23 also does have NFC, so like a lot of the others, if you want to make mobile contactless payments and use all those tap and pay features, you can do it with this phone no problem. But those were 5 of my favorite smartphones you can get in 2022 for less than $300. Now, as to which one is actually the best, that's really going to be up to you to decide, but I do think for what they are, each of these phones does provide quite a bit of value for the money. Now, of course, if you want to learn more about any of these phones individually, don't forget to check out my full reviews of them on the channel, where I go a lot more in depth about their features. And for the latest pricing, this information is always changing, so don't forget to check out the links in the video description. I will be including all of them there. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. But as always, I will see you in the next video.